Hi, everybody. It's day 16, and we are here with Dr. Jeffrey Wilhelm, who I have to say, I have such a warm spot in my heart because your name was on a recommendation letter that came with a brand new teacher to my school soon after I moved to New Hampshire. And I was so excited at the thought that I had a reason to call you, which I did, and then said, "Are you the Jeff Wilhelm of You Got to Be the Book?" And you said you were, and you talked about kayaking with this new teacher. We hired him enthusiastically. Wonderful writing project, writing centered teacher. So it's a thrill to talk to you. Thanks for joining us.
Well, it's a great thrill to talk to both of you. We were discussing right before we started how I've known both of you personally for 25 years now.
Crazy.
Yeah,
Crazy.
first time I saw Jeff was in 1996 when he did a all-day writing project workshop in Long Beach, California. And I sat there. It was my first exposure to you, Jeff. And I asked myself about 10 times, who the hell is this guy? You were so dynamic. And so I thought, man, when I grow up, I want to be that guy. And then I found out years later that I'm older than you. But I left there, and my first Wilhelm book was Strategic Reading, which you co-wrote with Tanya Baker and Julie Doobie. And I was a fan from then on. And I just want to say, we don't have time in 25 minutes to talk about everything that you've written, but we would be remiss if we didn't say that Reading Don't Fix No Chevys, won the NCTE Russell Award, which is a very prestigious award for a distinguished research in the field. And I may add, one of the greatest titles of a book ever, right? And so if guys haven't read Reading Don't Fix No Chevys, this whole idea of why the literacy crisis with boys, you were way out in front of the curve on that. And then I just want to say, Jeff, that next time I see you, I think you owe me dinner, because I own so many of your books that I have personally contributed to your long-term financial well-being. And I know in a minute we'll talk about your new book, but just thank you so much for being with us. And
Wait. Jeff, didn't you win the Russell Award for Reading Unbound, the Reading Love book, Love and Wisdom? Not that one.
Michael Smith from Temple University, and myself, we've won the Russell twice. And The first time was for Reading Don't Fix No Chevys, and the second time was for Reading Unbound.
And the whole idea, Jeff, that I don't believe anyone else has ever won it twice.
I don't know, but that would be cool to know.
Oh my gosh. I'm wicked impressed. I got to have dinner with you to celebrate you winning it the second time.
Yeah, so this is great that Kelly wants dinner from me and you're willing to buy me dinner.
That's right.
So I know before we came on, we were kind of talking about the state of education right now. And you kind of indicated that you feel now more than ever that we should be thinking about kids and how to teach them to read in the current climate, which is dripping with fake news. So I thought maybe we would just start with some thoughts about how you might approach that idea.
Well, thanks for that, Kelly. I'm actually finishing up writing a book about fake news, although we're calling it the new propaganda and information pollution. And I'm doing it with Michael Smith, who's a longtime collaborator, and Deb Appleman from Carleton. And I work with new teachers and I work with highly experienced teachers as part of my writing project. And I would say that this is on everybody's mind, is the kids are using social media. They're not going to news sources. They're getting their news that's filtered through artificial intelligence and uses these social media platforms to propagate. And it's a very big problem. So, we are working with teachers in the field about this, and we're writing this book to help people think about it. I'd say a couple of things that really spring to mind is that there's a lot of different kinds of fake news or information pollution, and all of them involve the reader. And the more benign forms are really totally on the reader. If you just misunderstand something, or if you're not equipped to understand something, like if you read The Onion as if it's serious, if you don't get irony, if you don't get satire, if you don't understand unreliable narrators, that's on you as a reader. And then there's fake skepticism. So this is when you pretend there's not other points of view, or that the evidence doesn't line up against you. So, that's totally on you as a reader. And then you get into the kinds of misinformation, malinformation, disinformation, the kinds of information pollution where it's on the text, but it's also on you as the reader. So malinformation, is the sharing of genuine information with the intent to cause harm. Maybe you apply poor reasoning to it. There's false connections, misleading content, false context, exaggeration. You see a lot of this commentary masquerading as news, like on Fox or MSNBC. Poor reasoning that doesn't fit disciplinary standards about data. And then there's disinformation. So it's created, it's totally made up and shared with harmful intent. And, the reader has to take responsibility, even in this case, for not being manipulated. There's imposter content, source impersonation, manipulated content, fabricated content like fake news or deep fakes, video, testimonials, all that kind of thing. As I began to research this, I was amazed at how much information pollution there is. And of course, it's not new. It probably goes back to the beginnings of human communication. What's new is that we have artificial intelligence that curates and filters and targets individuals. And one of the things that the teachers I'm working with have been doing is they're showing the kids excerpts of The Social Dilemma. And if you haven't watched that, I highly recommend watching it and rewatching it. And I've been in classrooms where the kids are watching these excerpts and it's blowing their minds how they're really the targets of not just misinformation and disinformation, but they're being moved to more extreme positions. If you start watching YouTubes on vegetarianism, you're then going to get it on veganism. And that's just how it works. It just moves you to more and more extreme places and positions. And the reason they do that is because it works, because of our cognitive bias. And our brains really evolved for a very different world than the one we're living in. So one of the things we're doing in the book is looking at cognitive biases. How can you make kids aware of them and control for them in some way? There's a great Buddhist story about this. The Buddha taught that the mind was one of three cups. And the first cup, which he said most people, this is the state of their mind, is an overturned cup, where underneath it is your identity, your way of thinking, your affiliations, your ideologies, and you don't want anything to interfere with that. You want to protect all that. And so any new knowledge can't be received. And then there's a cup that's upturned. You're willing, you're open, but you haven't done the practice to keep and retain what's been taught. And so it comes in and it flows through and you don't retain it. And then the third cup, the one the Buddha was promoting, was that an upturned cup that's receptive and open, but you do your Buddhist practice, or in this case, the mental practice, to control, to be critical, to be open but aware, and decide what you want to keep in the cup. And when you decide to keep something, then it's retained for you. And the major bias really of human beings is one for over dramatization. And of course, this was very useful when the grass moved and it could have been a saber-toothed tiger. If you didn't react to that, then, well, you didn't pass on your genes. But now the world's way more nuanced than that, and we overreact to everything. And of course, the news feeds into it. You're not going to see on the news, the Portland airport had 990 safe arrivals. You're going to see the one thing that went awry. And it's just human nature. It's a cognitive bias. Confirmation bias. We're always looking for information that confirms our previous position. And of course, news sources that are biased, like Fox, like MSNBC, they feed into this and they keep us from reading laterally and looking for other positions. Availability bias. We think the world's going to crap because that's what's attractive on the news, instead of looking at all the good things that are happening and how life is improving in almost every aspect. So anyway, the book's largely about making the kids aware of these cognitive biases and controlling for them, and and being very aware of how social media works. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on, but that's basically what we're doing. We also take a look at a lot of things that English teachers already teach, like perspective and positioning, and show how you can just add something to that. And you're going to be heightening kids' awareness about social media manipulations and information pollution, using critical theory lenses, things teachers do already, but we can expand the focus to really look at social media and how we're being manipulated.
Wow.
I'm gonna need about 5 hours to decompress what you just said.
I know. You know what,
'Cause
Jeff?
it's-
So- go ahead.
Go ahead, Penny.
No, I was working with a group of teachers this morning, K-8 teachers, and we were looking at one particular YouTuber's toy reviews. And one of the criticisms of his toy reviews is that they're being actually fought by the Federal Trade Commission because they promote products. And the position is that preschoolers that they're designed for can't distinguish. When they're watching cartoons, cartoon ends, commercial comes on, they know that's a different thing. When they're watching YouTube, there's no distinction between what I'm being marketed. And so they don't have the ability to be, you say it's on you, the reader. They're nowhere near that, right? They're absorbing information that is coming to them in a very manipulative way. And I just wondered, if our students don't have the critical thinking, I know we are focused on how do we develop that, but if they don't have it, what is that doing to us as?
Well, this is what I've been saying to all the teachers I'm working with. They're saying the kids can't do this. And I'm like, okay, what an opportunity.
Right.
It's an opportunity to teach. We have to jump into the breach. One of the things we're arguing in this new book is that we need to be teaching this at every grade level in every subject, because anytime the kids are accessing information, they should be asking, who created this information? Who benefits and who loses if I believe it? What do other sources and other perspectives say? How authoritative are the sources? You need to internalize those kind of things. And actually, there's research of the Ontario Institute of Education, which shows that kindergartners can do that if they're prompted,
right?
If we teach them to do it. So I think we need to be doing it all the time. Anytime you're accessing information, anytime you're making arguments. And it's hard for me to think of a unit where you wouldn't be or couldn't be doing that kind of thing. So any unit that's inquiry oriented at all is going to offer this opportunity. I'm working with these early career teachers. They're the ones who teach seniors are required to do a research paper. And they're like up in arms, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And so they have to do it. So we use this model that actually comes from 2 books that came out in April. So nobody knows about them because it was in the middle of COVID and Corwin had let go their whole marketing department. But it's called Planning Powerful Instruction. And it uses this mental model for planning called Empower. So the E vision, what are your threat knowledge goals? The M is map out where the kid. Oh, thank you so much, Kelly. You really are a completist. The M is map, where are the kids and where do they need to go? And how do we make this happen for them, step by step. And then that's kind of off stage. And then you have on stage, which is the priming and orienting, which is what do they already know? What do they already care about? What are the points of contact? And what's the purpose and immediate payoff for them? This is something that's often neglected in teaching, and it makes the teaching student-centered. Then you go to the walkthrough, which is really the crux move of cognitive apprenticeship. So it's helping the kids to do what they can't yet do alone and giving them the environmental enticements and giving them the instruction that's going to help them do this new thing in their zone of proximal development. Vygotsky himself defined teaching as helping kids to do what they can't yet do on their own. So we really focus on that. Then there's the extension and exploration where the kids have learned something new and you go, wow, what else would you like to find out about that's related to this? Or how would you like to apply it? Or, how would you like to take action with it? And now it's very student-centered again, right? Because now the kids are using what they've learned. They've achieved a new zone of actual development and they're putting it into play. And throughout you reflect. So it's a very elegant mental model that captures research from across the learning sciences, from motivation, from engagement, from effective teaching, all the way across the board. from deliberate practice, development of expertise. And so we asked these new teachers, we go, okay, let's empower this unit. And by the way, I've got all this stuff on a very short slideshow that I'm going to provide to you for the Padlet. So anyway, they start to think about it and they go, okay, we could do this. We could prime them by watching, this, by doing that. And then they still were frustrated. They go, we don't think they can do it. And I said, well, then what part of empower would you need to do more of? And it was like a lightning bolt. This one teacher said, we need to do a research paper with them. And they decided to do it on social media. And it was, these are regular track, senior classes, they've already kind of got seniorized. It was riveting. The kids were so engaged. And so the teachers were kind of writing this research paper and then asking them to help them out. What's some more evidence that we could find from this article? What would be the counter argument? Is it credible? Do we need to acknowledge it? So they're going through all this stuff and they're really teaching about social media. It's highly engaging. They're doing this walkthrough. And as they're doing it, they're saying to the students, now what's something you would like to research? How would you start asking research questions and refining them? How would you make sure that you're doing lateral reading and going through this fact checking? How would you then start extending it? And well, the bottom line was the kids were highly engaged. They participated in writing this research paper with the teachers, and then 100% assignment completion, which is almost unheard of, but they walked them through, they primed them, they oriented, they walked them through. Then they said, okay, now you can do your own. And that's the extension. That's the exploration, the research process. It was just a great example of cognitive apprenticeship in action and how you can get so many things done through one thing. So the teachers were dreading it. They're like, oh my God, we're going to have to read, 150 crappy research papers. And it turned out that they had a blast doing the walkthrough. And then the kids were doing such interesting things that engaged them for the research papers. And that kind of assignment completion is kind of unheard of. And the fact that they're getting quality work, was proof to them that this empower process works. And they started with this thing that's really interesting to kids, the social media manipulation, but they used it as the launch pad. So they got able to do this thing they really wanted to do that they didn't see how to do. And then it led into the thing that they had to do. Anyway, that's kind of a long riff about how the process works. And even throughout, the teachers would get online and go, I'm having this problem. And then I would say, what part of empower would help you? And they'd go, oh, more reflection, oh, we need to prime, we primed the unit, but we need to prime this particular segment of it. And it just gave them a language to think about what worked and why. And when something wasn't working, what they could do about it. So it wasn't just planning, it was like planning almost in situ.
It was also mentoring. I mean, the one thing that new teachers desperately want is someone like you, 25 years in the writing project, to say, what do you think I should do at this point? And all you said back was, which part of this is going to help you? But teachers are often in isolation and they get frustrated with that. Who do I ask? Who do I go to? And I just appreciate that you are still mentoring all these new teachers into the profession, which makes them love it and want to stay.
Well, this is something that we found in Reading Don't Fix Our Chevys, that the linchpin of all motivation is competence. When people are motivated, they're either already competent at something or they're developing visible signs of new competence. And it's tough when you're a new teacher because it's so overwhelming. There's so much going on. It's so intensely human. And if you have a few mental models to hang your hat on, that really helps. And it becomes a kind of environmental teaching. It's just there. You can use it to coach yourself through things. Or if you're working with a partner or a mentor, you can use it to guide your discussions. This is something both of you are so good at. When I think of 180 days, is putting those structures, ritual structures and mental models in an environment to help coach kids and teachers to be doing the things that we know work.
It's interesting listening to you, Jeff, that, the word that kept coming to my mind is pivot. Like we're in a point in our society where there's a huge pivot going on, right? towards a very different world, and this idea I'm going to spend 7 weeks teaching To Kill a Mockingbird, I'm not so sure is the right, it's time to rethink, a more, I don't know, a curriculum that launches them with some skill sets into the world that they're heading into.
Well, in planning powerful instruction, that's our initial argument, that, we need to teach things that have an immediate real world value. And I've devoted my life to teaching literature. I think that literature can be taught in a way that has immediate applications. And when it is taught that way, it's deeply engaging to kids. And you could take the same text taught by two different teachers, and it could be either deeply engaging or, deeply alienating. And so it depends on the approach. What we talk about in the book is that the primary mode of teaching in American schools after elementary school is information transmission, what Martin Haberman calls the pedagogy of poverty. And we argue that you can teach the same things if you're devoted to those things or required to teach those things, and you can do it through what we call teaching for transformation, which is the kind of cognitive apprenticeship that helps you to constantly outgrow yourself and to become more expert. And so this teaching for transformation is what we have to have. There's research that I just read a couple of weeks ago out of Stanford, which showed that a lot of elementary school kids are where they were last March. So there's been no learning. It's basically stagnant. So, kids losing a year, that's astonishing. And they said in high school, it's not so bad. But one of their explanations was the teaching in middle school and high school tends to be information transmission, so the kids aren't missing it. So it's another call to action that we really need to be teaching this threshold knowledge, the stuff that really matters, the stuff that takes you toward these gateways to expertise. And you can teach those things through any kind of content, through any kind of literature, but you need to focus on those things like inferencing or understanding how texts are created for meaning and effect. And, and then it has a benefit to you as a reader and a writer. Learning concepts that help you think totally differently about the world. And you'll never go back because you're internally persuaded, wow, this is the way that this thing works, and it's giving them more power in the world. So that's teaching for transformation. And it requires that we have mental models. That's Anders Ericsson. He said expertise resides in two things: in a mental model, for instance, of how argument works. If you don't understand how evidence works and that interpretation and analysis and reasoning is applied to that evidence to generate a claim. You don't start with a claim. You start with evidence, and then you apply disciplinary reasoning to it, and then you have to respond to counterclaims. That, if you have that mental model in your mind, it's going to help you teach. And it's going to help you anytime you write. It's going to help you anytime you read or critique someone else's argument. It's going to help you with social media. But he says you have to have that mental model, and then you need deliberate practice over time with that mental model. Erickson's the guy who said you have to have 10,000 hours of practice to become an expert. And actually, that's Malcolm Gladwell, because Erickson thought that was such an oversimplification. He wrote his own book called Peak. And he said, look, you could practice 10,000 hours and still suck. Mm-hmm. You got to practice the way experts practice.
Right.
So you have to have this mental model that an expert would hold, and you got to practice those components. And it's only with mindful, conscious, deliberate practice that's matched to the mental model of an expert that you get better. And that's what cognitive apprenticeship is all about. That's what teaching for transformation is all about. It starts with the kids, with the priming, the orienting, then it inducts them into some new layer of expertise, then it asks them to extend it and explore it. So it gets back to the student-centered thing, but you're always centering things on the kids learning something new that takes them through a gateway that'll serve them for the rest of their lives. So you're focusing on these really big things. So I think you're right, Kelly. We've got to teach differently. We have to plan differently, and we're going to get all the things done that we deeply care about and are committed to in a much more effective way. And that's really what the books are about.
That's Jeff's new book. He's written with Rachel Baer and Adam, is it Faulkner?
It's in a bachelor, and there's also an elementary version, which is grades 2 through 5, which I wrote with Jackie Miller and Chris Butts. And these are writing project fellows from my National Writing Project site who've been doing this work over the last 10, 11 years. We started it when we knew the Common Core and the next generation standards were coming. So it's all about how do we teach for these deep understandings in a way that's deeply engaging to kids and builds their capacity.
Wow.
Well, you remind me of like, who is that guy? Right? Who is that guy? Every time I hear you speak, man, I just love it. You know, I've written down so many phrases that are new to me, you know, information pollution. I love that. I love that idea. On a lighter note, we often end these short conversations with a little lightning round questions that are just weird and off the cuff. And so if you're up for it, we do 2 or 3 of those before we say goodbye. And then we want to talk. Then we want to talk before you leave about the webinar that you're doing soon.
Oh, yeah, thanks so much. Michael Smith and Tom Newkirk and I are doing a webinar on April 22nd. It'll be on the slide deck that I share with Kelly and Penny for the Padlet. And it's on April 22nd in the afternoon. And it's based on Tom's new book, which is Writing Unbound, and our book on reading pleasure called Reading Unbound. And I think if you're looking to make up for learning loss, if you're looking to have a summer reading program that's going to help your kids, I think you've got to focus on pleasure. And I do think reading is something that we do think of as being potentially pleasurable. But Tom's done such a wonderful job thinking about writing and how writing can be this great and deep pleasure for kids and something that they would do on their own. So I hope you'll tune in for that because it has a lot of implications for in-class teaching, but also for summer programs if you're hoping to get kids engaged in reading and writing over the summer.
And
Give us the date.
Yeah, it's April 22nd. It's sponsored by the American Reading Company. So you could go to their website and see it. And I'm also tweeting about it at Dr. Reed J. Wilhelm. I'll send the stuff to you guys so you can tweet about it. So there'll be multiple places you can find the registration link.
We'll put the link in our Padlet, so anybody listening to this can go to the Padlet and find it. Penny?
Okay, Jeff, what's a nickname your parents used to call you?
Nerf. And that's because I had a giant kind of afro all through my childhood. And it actually drove my dad a little bit crazy. You know, he was a World War II veteran. So they called me Nerf because I looked like a Nerf ball.
Oh, my word. That was gold.
That is one film means a lot to you.
Well, this is like asking a favorite book, you know, it's so hard. I
did not use the word favorite. I said one.
Oh, one. Okay, great. That's good. The Deer Hunter has stuck with me. You know, I grew up during the Vietnam War era. I was 1 year away from being drafted. So, that one just sticks with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great film.
It is great. Jeff, thanks so much for your time, really scheduling us into your very busy life.
No, thank you for including me. It's always a pleasure. And I so admire both of you and your work and commitment to teachers. And Kelly, looking forward to having you this summer at our Boise State Writing Project.
Nice.
Jeff has been the director of the Boise State Writing Project for 25 years. I don't know how he finds time to do that with all the books that he writes and co-writes and all the Nordic skiing and cross-country skiing that he does. Kayaking. We're so happy to see you again, Jeff, and I can't wait to see you in a couple months. Your Teachers is the first in-person gig I'm doing since the pandemic, so I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, we're really looking forward to it too.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Being here.
See ya.